Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another All Minus One Story Time, the show where we talk about great stories of influential people. We've been reading from COVID-19, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab, and we will be picking up here in the next portion of this. So, everyone, I hope you have been well since the last time I've done this segment. I obviously was away for a while. I've been doing some quick shots at a video earlier in the week, but next week I will probably be doing my normal news schedule, which is to try and do 2 story times a week, perhaps on the same book, perhaps separate books. Find out for yourself, and then 2 longer segments, or at least 1 a week. So I will be doing probably a story time on Monday, and then another segment talking about either news or culture or history, as I often do, adding my philosophical and Christian perspectives to that. And then I will do our live show Wednesday, or maybe release another story time on Thursday, and then on Friday, if I have time in my schedule, having a family and other obligations, I will do another 45-minute to hour-long segment on some other topic of the week. And of course, every week you can, every day during the weekday, Monday through Friday, you can expect me to release a quick shot. That's something I'm really dedicated to doing every single day on some sort of either political or philosophical musing of mine, just something that might be on my heart or things that I am seeing. Again, politics right now are quite boring to me because it's like everything I've been talking about for the last 6 months or 7 months I've been making creator content is just coming true because I know how it works, guys. It's all about the globalist, the NGOs. It's all about corporatism, and it's all about making you a debt slave. So with that, we're going to read from Klaus Schwab's book to understand this a little bit better. And here it says, interdependence has an important conceptual effect. It invalidates solo thinking, since conflation and systematic connectivity are what ultimately matter. Addressing the problem or assessing an issue or a risk in isolation from the others is senseless and futile. I kind of agree with this. And I believe, again, this is the last section that I read last time. I'm going to start with this, though, because we're about to get into the 1.1.2, velocity. So I would agree with the sentiment that there is interdependence, but there is also individuality. This is why things need to be decentralized. Collectivizing them and centralizing everything actually makes it weaker. I was just listening to my friend, who is a kind of world-renowned strength and combative coach, Greg Mahovich, and I was listening to him on the Full Spectrum Warrior podcast. He is an instructor with that organization. And he was talking about his struggle with Lyme's disease, which he was in the midst of the last time I personally had stayed with him about 3 years ago. And this thing whittled him down to a thing where he realized he wasn't anything more than what he made his job. And I understand it. Like, I'm obsessive like him with those things. He far more so than I. He's a very motivated and driven individual. But what happens is you go through an identity crisis when you are not a multivariant type person, when you haven't diversified yourself. And so going through such an identity crisis becomes very hard psychologically. You lose any sort of notion of positivity because you don't know where to go. You don't know where to turn because it feels like everything that you were was stripped from you. I experienced this once as I had stepchildren and my own daughter with my first wife. And after things were so bad, I decided to separate and decided that I was going to try and get myself straight. Then perhaps we could reunite, and she just continued to go down the path of destruction. And one of the things that she did, of course, was remove any possibility of me seeing the children except for my daughter, because I had no legal rights over the children, even though I had raised them for 7 years, 8 years nearly. So these things are destructive. And so Schwab is correct in this, but what they're really looking at, what this is really going to detail, is that they think that those who are the elite are the ones who get to dictate things and that they see everything. And it's not possible, guys. They don't even realize the world that you live in. I mean, to go to Davos for the World Economic Forum is something like $60,000. Like, that's the base price. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have that kind of money just to spend on, a couple of days listening to people tell me how they're going to organize the world. And I think most of you, most folks out there, I'd say 98% or more do not. So let's see here. It says, in the past, this solo thinking partially explains why so many economists failed to predict the credit crisis in 2008. And I believe last time when I read this, I explained it again. People did predict it. Ron Paul and Peter Schiff very specifically predicted this. And why so few politicians, scientists saw the Arab Spring coming in 2011? I mean, no. The reason why you guys failed to see that, why folks failed to see those things coming, is because they were listening to the machine that Klaus Schwab is a part of. It was all top-down authority telling them things. It wasn't the decentralized community, decentralized communication, working together and allowing people to work independently. And I can tell you right now, you start getting into governmental organizations and they like to quash the decentralization. The only one I am aware of that is good with this is the military, and even there, you're going to find snags and snares. You're going to find poor leaders. Today, the problem is the same with the pandemic. Epidemiologists, public health specialists, economists, social scientists, and all other scientists and specialists who are in the business of helping decision-making understand what lies ahead. Find it difficult and sometimes impossible to cross the boundaries of their own disciplines. It's not that hard. It's what I do here every day on, all minus one. Everything I do is cross-disciplinary. But I'm an autodidact who believes very much in the idea of the Renaissance man, the polymath, being very well-rounded, being very diversified. That is why addressing complex trade-offs such as containing the progression of the pandemic versus reopening the economy is so fiendishly difficult. Understandably, most experts end up being segregated into increasingly narrow fields. No, again, this is the authoritarianism. This is what universities do. Several years back, because of this problem, Georgetown University, surprisingly, being a Jesuit university, but Georgetown decided it was going to create a doctorate of liberal arts. I actually commend that because I'm a fan of the liberal arts. That is the classical liberal education. That is, you learned languages, you learned history, you understood psychology, sociology, philosophy, all those things, understanding the human condition, and therefore you would become a better leader and a better thinker. And so to get a doctorate under the Georgetown guidelines, because I looked into this a few years back, you essentially, your doctoral thesis has to be cross-dimensional into various fields, and you want to unify them. Now, I kind of naturally do this. This is one of the advantages of my dyslexia, despite me not being able to spell anything or pronounce words on occasion. It is a tendency for dyslexic folk to be able to do that. Therefore, they lack an enlarged view necessary to connect the many different dots that provide the more complicated picture and decision markers desperately needed. And that is actually the problem with becoming an expert instead of well-rounded, because an expert is myopic. They can only see in one way. They become obtuse. They don't know what they're looking at outside of what they know. I recall several years ago when I was injured, my knee was dislocating, no joke, in the middle of work. My knee would just literally untrack and lock up and be out of place, my kneecap, the patella. And I went to an orthopedic specialist and he took an x-ray and he goes, "No, it's not dislocated." And I'm like, "You idiot. You just took me an x-ray of me in a static state, not doing any work." I'm telling you right now, when I go to work, at the time I was working part-time at FedEx to make some extra bucks and keep things above water because I was going to school. I was like, my knee is dislocating while I'm working. Well, I don't see any evidence of that. Of course you don't, because you're looking at it in a static state where it's not mechanically active. And again, that's that obtuseness that the doctors couldn't see it. Well, I'm the expert. I have all these letters behind my name. I've studied this for so long. Yeah, I don't care, because your theories do not matter to the practicality. And this doesn't mean I don't respect people who have knowledge. I do, but I respect people who are willing to listen. My former doctor, he's now retired, but my family physician, he was always willing to listen. He was a brilliant guy, consummate student, like just on it. And that is rare and few and far between. So here in the next section, it says above, this is velocity, it says above firmly points the finger at technological progress and globalization as a primary culprits responsible for greater interdependence. In addition, they have created such a culture of immediacy that it is not an exaggeration to claim that in today's world, everything moves much faster than before. I 1000% disagree. In the modern technocratic world, yes. I have a good friend of mine. Is originally from Mexico, and he loves Mexico because many parts of Mexico are still very laid back. Life is much slower, and it's because they're not relying on all the technology. They're not relying on getting here to there. They're not relying on cities. It's country life. It's family. It's community. It's the way that we are supposed to interact as human beings. There are studies done with people who still live primitive type tribal lives. Now they have some modern conveniences, but they still live this lifestyle, and they just do not understand the modern lifestyle. Guys, it's poison, and it poisons your brain into thinking that materialism will make you happy. People go into cities and they become psychopaths who don't understand that resources are actually abundant. Now, there is a thing of scarcity, because scarcity is a matter of getting the resources in the first place and then getting them into products into people's hands. And of course, there is not an infinite supply of things per se, but we don't really know how deep the supplies go or how long we can be sustained by it. For instance, peak oil has been called time and time and time again. In fact, my co-host Tank on the Ends Justify the Memes has brought up this issue before, that we may be reaching that soon. And of course, my objection is they've been talking about peak oil for, well over 50 years. We just don't know. And of course, as technology changes, so will our means of using energy. But, food resources, lumber, all those other things. People in cities, they don't understand this because it's easy for them to get cut off. A great historical example, now there are many, but one that is relevant to my mind is Christ predicting the siege of Jerusalem and the Olivet Discord. That is that Matthew 23 or 24? 24, I think. I might have got that wrong, but off the top of my head. Anyways, the Olivet Discourse is the prediction of the Temple of Jerusalem coming down. And literally, if you read about this, I believe Josephus documented this rather well, but if you read any recordings about this, it was a horrible thing where people were going around because the town was basically cut off, closed off, and people couldn't get supplies, and they were going around and they were hunting down children and babies to eat. People get crazy when things get desperate. And this is why I wish to prepare you all for the things that will eventually be coming, because there is no slowing this thing down, as the majority of the federal government is utterly corrupt and does not care about America, only cares about the global agenda. It says, if just one thing were to be singled out to explain this astonishing increase in velocity, it would be undoubtedly the internet. No, that helps with quicker access of knowledge and also communication between individuals. This is a good thing, just like the printing press was. They want you to think otherwise. More than half, 52% of the world's population is now online, compared to less than 8% 20 years ago. Also, let me say this. The internet can be a bad thing if you use it incorrectly, like anything else. It is merely a tool. Don't get addicted to the tool. In 2019, more than 1.5 billion smartphones, a symbol and vector of velocity that has allowed us to be reached anywhere at any time, were sold around the world. The Internet of Things now connects 22 billion devices in real time, ranging from cars to hospital beds, electric grids, and water station pumps to kitchen ovens and agricultural irrigation systems. That, my friends, sounds like a problem because without redundancy backups, and there might be here, that is at any point, grid goes down, big, big, big problems. This is one of the, look, guys, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not anti-technology. I believe in technology. Firearms, we talk about firearms. I'm all about using red dots or green dots, man. Technology's good. Back in my day as a Marine, we used iron sights. Red dots and green dots, way better than iron sights because it's point and shoot versus me having to line things up and whatever else. Technology's good, but what happens when the battery fails on that thing? Well, I still have to know how to use iron sights. And iron sights, they don't fail, guys. This number is expected to reach 50 billion or more in 2030. Other explanations for the rise in velocity point to the scarcity element. As societies get richer, time becomes more valuable and is therefore perceived as even more scarce. This is actually incorrect. This is backwards. We actually have more time, more luxury, more leisure as we get wealthier. The reason why you feel like you're rushed all the time is because you waste your time. You are wasting your time in your leisure. Instead of improving yourself or doing things like, I don't know, going for a walk outside or going to the woods or swimming in a lake or just, building a fire, relaxing, spending time with folks, you're on your phone, you're on your little Google machine and you're stuck into it. You're attached to this thing and you're killing time doing stupid things. And guys, I'm guilty of this myself. I've done it in the past. I'm very aware of it, very cognitive of it, and I make sure that I don't do that anymore. But on occasion, I will get caught up into things. I mean, my show, every Wednesday, we run a Memecast News, the real fake news, and it's based on memes. It's a joke, right? But we talk about things that were in the news based on memes. I have to spend time gathering memes. So I don't spend time, though, or waste time on Twitter or on Facebook. I used to waste time on Facebook, but not anymore. I wish to do things actively. If I am relaxing, I'm usually listening to a podcast, watching a documentary, watching someone cover news, something. But that's not a waste of my time because while I'm doing that as well, I'm also writing things down. I'm mining the memes. I'm doing whatever else I need to do or making dinner. So this is a matter of perception. And Schwab here is trying to tell you, whoa, there's less time. There's really not. Now, if we go all the way back to hunter-gatherer days, sure, they had more leisure. They did a lot less. They went and hunted. They came back. They got the food. They were kind of already set up, sat around and chilled. And life was in some ways a lot more simpler, like I was talking about before. But as the old saying goes, idle hands are the devil's playground. And the reason why that saying exists is because when you don't have things to do, you get bored. You start to look down on your life. With the modern technology, people look at things like Instagram. They go, all these people have better lives than me. Well, most of them, their lives are crazy. Look at any girl that posts all this inspirational stuff. 1,000% guarantee they have a really jacked up life. And I've met plenty of them back in my days when I used to date a lot. I can tell you, there are plenty of them. Not that you shouldn't post motivational, inspirational things. I'm just saying. This may explain studies showing that people in wealthy cities always walk faster than in poor cities, or maybe they're trying to get somewhere. No matter what the casual explanation is the end game of all of this is clear. As consumers and producers, spouses and parents, leaders and followers, we are being subjected to constant, but discontinuous, rapid change. Not really. What we are being presented to or with is novelty. And novelty basically distracts us from our problems. And this is all I see social media as originally. Like, I thought all that stuff was stupid. Got on the Facebook to follow one friend of mine who lived in California at the time. One friend. Next thing I know, I realized it was a good news aggregate. And that was a decade ago, and the thing has changed so much. And I was in groups, and I used to be on it all the time, and I'm fine. I had wasted 4 or 5 hours of my day talking to people online. Was it a waste? Maybe not. Sometimes for me, though, I miss sleep. Sometimes that's why I was on, because I couldn't sleep. But then you miss more sleep than you maybe would have gotten. So consider these things, folks. Consider what you're doing. We can see velocity everywhere, whether it is a crisis, social discontent, technological developments and adaptation, geopolitical upheaval, the financial markets, and of course, the manifestation of infectious disease. Okay, let's break all that down. The velocity everywhere, meaning that it's just ever growing and expanding and whatever else. Well, social discontent. Why is there social discontent? Well, let's go back to the financial markets. There's social discontent because we have an oligarchy who, from the top down, control the market system via a centralized bank. This would not happen with a free market system and money in the hands of the people. Technological developments and adaptations. Well, that doesn't really affect most people. Most people don't care so much about that. They're like, oh, did you see this neat, cool thing? Now, Klaus Schwab might know more about this stuff, but look, man, like, think about your average person. You might know a tech guy or this guy or that guy. Most people I know, of course, I don't live in a city area, but most people I used to work with or know or whatever else, man, we want to go do floats down the river or go watch a UFC fight or, go shoot guns or just hang out, have a barbecue, have people over and play cards or a board game. Maybe we play some video games. Maybe you're that type. Everyone gets together and plays some Halo or something like that. I don't see this obsession with technology outside of the hegemony, outside of the cathedral, if you would, as the Mulbuggians would like to say, the Curtis Yarvin fans. The geopolitical upheaval. Well, again, that goes back to financial markets. So everything he's talking about here goes back to the monetary system and the centralized banking system. They're going to make it worse, by the way. We will be in a cashless society. If not in the next 10 years, it'll be, no doubt, in the next 30 years. It's just going to happen, folks. We are increasingly a cashless society. Everything now runs on fast forward. Again, I disagree. There is a lot of manic people, though, running things and out there trying to fearmonger and clickbait you. As a result, we operate in a real-time society with a nagging feeling that the pace of life is ever increasing. That is your own personal fault for doing that. That is not anything going on with the world. It's because you don't know how to control your addictions. You are a slave. Go watch my quick shot segment earlier. You're a slave to this technology. You're not free. You're not free, and that's why you feel this way. This new cultural immediacy, obsessed with speed, is apparent in all aspects of our lives, from just-in-time supply chains to high-frequency trading, from speed dating to fast food. These things developed long before, and I hate when people use fast food. Fast food has always existed, folks. Street food has a very ancient origin. It's always been in cities. There's always been street vendors with food pre-made. This isn't a new concept. Maybe in certain eras this wasn't a thing as much, and you had to go to a pub or a restaurant or something. But guys, speed dating. Well, this is just this is a product of our culture basically losing any sort of moral guidelines. It's our moral degradation, or degeneracy, if you would. That's where all that comes from. And again, all of this is pushed. It is just pushed. It's pushed from the top down. It's pushed by the people who run and own the culture. It says, it is so pervasive that some pundits call it, this new phenomenon, the dictatorship of urgency. Again, you become a slave, right? If this is the case, folks, you really need to re-examine your life and how you are conducting yourself and things. It can indeed take extreme forms. Research performed by scientists at Microsoft show, for example, that being slower by no more than 250 milliseconds, a quarter of a second, is enough for a website to lose hits to its fastest competitors. Okay, but who cares? Like, I'm in this sphere of content creators on YouTube, Rumble, PeerTube, started re-uploading to BitChute. I'm not a fan of BitChute, but gonna do it. Instagram, where else am I at now? Who knows? Anyways, links will be in the description, folks. Locals. I'm not worried about competitors. I'm worried about allies. Again, this is all about mindset. I'm worried about making allies. Now, would I eventually like to make some profit off of this labor of love of mine? Of course, because I'm providing a service and I would like to be compensated for that. Am I going to do that in some sort of paywall or No. If you want to contribute, you contribute. If not, then whatever. I will continue to do this. I know that someone will come along and say, hey, Bill, we appreciate what you do, and it'll be there. I don't need to compete against anybody. I'm letting God provide. But again, mindset. Mindset, the proper attitude, the proper spiritual approach. The all-embracing result is that the self-life of a policy, a product, or an idea, and the life cycle of a decision maker or a project are contracting sharply and often unpredictable. The only thing that's unpredictable is, well, the monetary supply, because it's not on being worked on a market basis, therefore throwing all of the laws of economics out the window, and thus unpredictable things happen. The most predictable thing, though, that will happen is the crash of the dollar. That'll be coming in the next year or two for certain, with the amount of inflation that has been going on, and the announcement from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve Bank that they will be doing the same amount of inflation this year. Nothing illustrated this more vividly than the breakneck speed with which the coup progressed in March 2020. In less than a month from the maelstrom provoked by the staggering speed at which the pandemic engulfed most of the world, a whole new era seemed to emerge. Isn't this interesting how this started last October in Wuhan, and he's talking about March? It's pretty interesting that Xi Jinping spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos just a few weeks back, isn't it? And not once talked about their inability to have transparency with the rest of the world, or that the virus was their fault and released from a level 4 lab that was studying gain-of-function viruses. And gain-of-function being that they are trying to make super viruses in order to learn how to kill them. A completely retarded thing to do, by my estimation, as it is like going, this kid over in school bullies me, therefore I'm going to take him to the weight room, train him jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, and hope that I'll be able to beat him up. And maybe if you're training too, but if he's bigger than you, then don't count on it, guys. You better hope you have a lot more skill. Anyways, since the beginning of the outbreak was thought to have taken place in China sometime earlier, but the exponential global progression of the pandemic took many decision makers and a majority of the public by surprise because we generally find it cognitively hard to grasp the significant exponential growth. No, not at all. Actually, I knew about this early on, probably in December. I didn't know about it way back from the beginning, maybe the end of November, because that's really when reports were coming out. But I was aware, and again, I wasn't aware. I was kind of paying attention, but I wasn't unaware of the consequences of this potentially. But what I was more concerned with was how folks were going to act. I had this conversation with my wife and daughter, concerned about people, especially once we started going into the lockdown stuff. And again, I was kind of okay with lockdowns originally because I've worked in with the medical community before, and I understood the concern. After a month, we knew what we were dealing with, folks. The reason why we don't seem to know what we're dealing with is because you're having experts from the top down telling you that. And the reality is there are plenty of other experts who say differently. See, that's what happens when you get decentralization. And then communities on their own can take care of themselves as they see fit and necessary. But what we're looking at right now is all top-down authoritarian control, and Klaus Schwab trying to use this as an excuse for, this did all these things, when he's even said it's an opportunity to do what we want to do. This is just opportunist. That's all it is. It's an excuse to take over. Never let a good crisis go to waste, as the saying goes. Consider the following in terms of days of doubling. The pandemic grows 30% a day, as it did around mid-March. Some of the worst affected countries, registered cases or deaths will double in a little more than 2 days. If it grows 20%, it will take between 4 and 5 days. Okay, well, that doesn't matter. The numbers are the same globally, really. Some places have higher infection rates, but the death rate is exactly the same. And again, that's all you have to do. Stop focusing in myopically, pan out. That's why every time I've covered the subject on this channel here on All Minus One, you will see that I'm looking at global statistics. I'm looking at numbers from all over the place. That is how you analyze data. You do not focus on a singular data point. We have a whole dietary system in the United States based on Ansel Keys manipulating data and throwing out all the data points that don't concur with his theory that saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease. Ansel Keys, probably directly because of that, because of his poor science and purposeful manipulation of science and data, has probably allowed and caused, based on government dietary recommendations, more heart disease and diabetes in the last 40, 50 years than ever before. I mean, it's just a fact, guys. I can take you through it. I probably will sometime. I've talked about it before. It's actually one of my one of the things I'm more learned in. So if it grows at 20%, yeah, I don't care about all this number. 3 months of reaching 100,000, yeah, who cares? I really don't care. If, there's 7 billion people on Earth and 3 billion of them get a cold, I don't care. You know why? Because everybody gets a cold on occasion. Most everybody. What I do care about is what the governments are doing, like shutting down businesses, requiring ridiculous restrictions that don't do anything. The constant fear-mongering by the mainstream media, and technocrats like Klaus Schwab himself, who wishes to use this as an excuse to usher in their great reset, their stakeholder capitalism, or, I don't even know what that means. True stakeholder capitalism, the way they wish to present it, would mean laissez-faire capitalism. No bailouts, no favoritism from the government, nothing but consumer and basically provider, distributor, whatever you want to call it. These numbers make our heads spin. Extreme velocity in action, exponential growth is so baffling to our cognitive function that we often deal with, the exponential deal with it by developing exponential myopia. That's interesting. He uses my terminology, right? Thinking of it as nothing more than very fast. In a famous experiment conducted in 1975, two psychologists found that when we have to predict an exponential process, we often underestimate it by a factor of 10. Okay. I guarantee you, if you get all the smartest minds in the world together, there was somebody that would guess that, and then the rest of them would come in some sort of democratic way and go, no, that's not science, folks. Science is not a democratic process. It is literally a process of measures, of measuring if what you believe is true or not, and setting up essentially experiments to limit the possibility of errors in that judgment. Understanding this growth dynamic and power of the exponential clarifies why velocity is such an issue and why the speed of intervention to curb the rate of growth is so crucial. Ernest Hemingway understood this in his novel The Sun Also Rises. Two characters have the following conversation. How did you go bankrupt? Bill asked. Two ways, Mike said. Gradually and then suddenly. The same tends to happen for big systemic shifts and distribution in general. Things tend to change gradually at the first and then all at once, except the same for the micro reset, which we'll get to. Interesting, he uses Hemingway, by the way, who, if I'm not mistaken, committed suicide, right? I know he's a great American author. Anyways, or classic author, whatever. Not only does velocity take extreme forms, but it can also engender preserve effects. Impatience, for example, is one of the effects in which can be seen similarly in the behavior of participants and the financial markets, with new research suggesting that momentum trading based on velocity leads to stock prices to deviate persistently from the fundamental value or correct price. Well, first off, Schwab is an economist, and this is a bunch of nonsense talk. The market value of a price is whatever the price is demanded at. What he's talking about is no, we say there's a price and it has changed, like the whole GameStonk thing. GameStop just a few weeks ago with Robinhood and all that stuff. Now, it was away during most of this, but this is exactly what he's talking. How you can't control the markets this way? Well, look, if the market decides, if the people decide that something has a value at that price, that is the price it has a value at. Much like ammunition right now is hard to get a hold of, and the price has gone up significantly. That's how it works, folks. It says, and that of voters in an election. The latter will have a critical reliance in the post-pandemic era. Governments, by necessity, take a while to make decisions and implement them. They are obliged to consider many different constituent groups and competing interests, balance domestic concerns with external considerations, and secure legislative approval before putting into motion the bureaucratic machinery to act all those decisions. Not true. That is completely false. That is a gaslighting statement. They have no problem implementing things overnight as long as it is for special interests, just not for the populace. Recall back in 2008, during the stock market crash, George W. Bush says, I have to abandon free market principles to save the free market. Let me tell you a secret, folks. GW, he was never a free marketeer. He's a neocon, always was, pretended to be something else. They gave bailouts rather quickly. There was no slow process in that. It's the difference between taking care of businesses and taking care of people. This isn't trickle-down economics, by the way, which is a made-up term. It doesn't exist. But the idea, to some degree, is, well, these corporations are important. They provide jobs. They keep the economy going. We have all these ties in it, government contracts, whatever else. This is how we get tax money to do our crazy things that we want. And these people and these corporations are also globalist, so let's make sure we prop them up. Screw everyone else, the 70, 60, 70%, whatever it is, that are regular, everyday Americans. This is why we went so hardcore with outsourcing, getting rid of our manufacturing in America, everything else, because it was about the bottom line for the corporation, not the average citizen. By contrast, voters expect almost immediate policy results and improvements, which then they don't arrive fast enough, lead to almost instantaneous disappointment. Yes and no. Naive voters do that. People who don't really understand the system, and most people don't understand it very well. What really happens, though, is they're given promises that never come to fruition. It's pretty much that simple. Because, again, this is all based on emotional appeals to get you to vote for the guy. And then once you vote for the guy or the gal, whomever it may be, they just go with their special corporate interest once again. It's just how it works, guys. It's the way it's worked for well nigh 50 years, I'm pretty certain. At least since the 60s, and probably before that. This kind of started this way with FDR, except for there was a battle constantly between him and the businesses and a lot of stuff. But once Kennedy dropped the tax rate down, where the marginal tax rate was not like 90%, because no one paid that, by the way, because they just did stupid stuff to get around it. But in any case, once that kind of happened and all, then we started to see this, and then we started to enter a period of inflation, of course, which was during the Carter administration, and we really saw this solidify in the 80s. This wasn't necessarily Reagan's fault either, so don't blame it on him alone, but this is just how things went. And this is also a time period where we went away from having an actual two-party system to having the mono-party. As I often say, Nixon was the first neocon president long before that term was in existence. Let's see here. This problem of asynchronicity between two different groups, policymakers and the public, whose time horizon differs so markedly, will be acute and very difficult to manage in the context of the pandemic. The velocity of the shock and the depth of the pain it has inflicted will not and cannot be matched with equal velocity on the policy side. Velocity also led many observers to establish a false equivalency by comparing seasonal flu with the coof. This comparison, made again and again in the early months of the pandemic, was misleading and conceptually erroneous. Yes and no. It is certainly worse than the flu to some degree, but we don't measure things we just don't measure things the way they've been measuring them all of a sudden. And again, you go back to I'll link it at the end of this, some of my other work, and you can look at this yourself. We're just doing things a different way on purpose in order to manipulate the population. It's blatantly obvious, especially if you spent any time in the medical field, like I have. I've been a first responder since I was 16. So we're talking about 24 years, guys. I've been through nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare training in the military. I've worked in hospital settings. I can tell you, in many different hospitals, by the way. It's just, the stuff we're doing is ridiculous. And if you talk to medical personnel who know their stuff, they'll tell you the same, if they're honest. Let's take an example of the U.S. to hammer out the point and better grasp the role played by velocity of illness. According to the Centers for Disease Control, between 39 and 56 million Americans contracted the flu between 2019 and 2020 winter season, with between 24 and 26,000 deaths. Recall, though, this year, no one's getting the flu. By contrast, and according to Johns Hopkins University, on June 24, 2020, more than 2.3 million were diagnosed with the coof. Okay. Yes. But you just compared deaths to what people contracted. And then you said almost 1,221 people had died. Okay. But you just did a little bait and switch there, Mr. Schwab, where you took deaths and cases, because I guarantee you, if you diagnosed flu cases, they were probably just as high, Maybe they were lower, but we have to look at that comparison. And we know what the rate is generally of death by the flu compared to the COOF. And again, this is global, guys. We know what it is. And we also know the treatments for it. Number one, sunlight, vitamin D. If you can't get sunlight, take a vitamin D supplement. You can take 5,000 milligrams a day. You actually don't even need that much because it has a half, I forget what the half-life is, but I think it's 3 weeks. So that much will stay in your system for a while. So every 2 weeks you take one of those. But if you take them, if you think you're low, you think you're deficient, take one of those every day. Get some sunlight. If you're in an area that's cold and wintry, like a lot of areas are right now in the U.S., then make sure you take that supplement. That's one of them. Make sure you get your proper nutrients in and minerals. What we're looking at is a very sick, unhealthy population. We have a lot of sick, unhealthy people out there. Of course, they're going to have a hard time with this, and that was the majority of the people dying. I always point back to the article that was in the BBC with the doctor talking about how they will take a lot of these deaths off because they would have expected folks to die within a year. It was already people who were elderly, who had heart disease, who had influenza at the time, that also got the COOF on top of it, who may have had renal failure or other things going on. We have the CDC numbers, which I've covered before, which compare the COOF with the flu and pneumonia and all these other things and not with and whatever, deliberately, to my mind, in my opinion, deliberately misleading in the way it's set up because it's not clear. Someone will speak to you clearly if they want you to know the truth. They will overcomplicate things if they're trying to hide something. Look at what's his name? Eric Michael Dyson and his debate with Jordan Peterson, or Eric Michael Dyson in general, where he talks his postmodernist jive, which means absolutely nothing. It is just a giant word salad purposely meant to confuse you and give him a intellectual superiority over you. Because this is how postmodernists think. It's always about power. So if you can't understand what I said, it's your fault, not mine, right? Understand that. But if you say something and they're offended, again, it's your fault, not mine. It's always a position of power. This would be, this is pretty, it's pretty dark and pretty sick. But if guys, you ever learned like how to date and like game, that kind of stuff, it's a very similar mindset. It's always maintaining control, maintaining your frame, if you would, that your mindset, the framing and how you frame things, always in your control. And actually, this is generally a very good way to approach life. And until you get to a point where you're not going to lie to yourself anymore. If you want to try and control everything, that is. But yeah, once you decide you're not going to lie to yourself anymore, you can't just frame things the way you want it to. You have to look at things objectively, right? And obviously, Mr. Schwab here is framing everything the way that he wants to because he has an objective to reach, and that is to convince you that his great reset is good for you. It says the flu numbers correspond with estimated total flu burden, while the COOF figures are confirmed cases. The seasonal flu cascades in gentle waves over a period of up to 6 months, and patterns of the COOF virus spread like a tsunami in a hospital pattern. Now, that's not actually true, or hotspot pattern. It's not actually true from what I understand from the data either. But I don't know if he's going to show any data here because I haven't read this ahead of time. And in doing so, can overwhelm and jam healthcare capacities. Has not done that a single time that I'm aware of. And if it has, it's been in very isolated locations. And that is a problem, my friends, of infrastructure. Because you know what? Hospitals always run on the margin. They don't make money otherwise. I worked at the hospital down the street for about a year, and I can tell you, we were at full capacity like 90% of the time. Like we're getting one bed available was a big deal. This was a year before the pandemic. Monopolizing hospitals to the detriment of non-COOF patients. The second reason, and actually, no, that was because hospitals decided that they weren't going to treat other people. Many medical facilities were shut down due to the government. The second reason, the velocity with which the COOF pandemic surges and suddenness with which clusters emerges makes all the difference and renders comparison with the flu irrelevant. Look, man, it's just a disease. It's not the worst disease we've ever had. It's far less deadly than SARS or MERS, and generally most people are going to survive this. Some people won't. It's life, guys. Memento mori. Remember, someday you will die. Velocity lies at the root of the first and second reasons in the vast majority of countries. The speed of which the epidemic progressed made, of course, I'm going to play with this little game with this thing again, made it impossible to have sufficient testing capacities and then overwhelmed many national health systems equipped to deal with a predictable, reluctant, and rather slow seasonal flu, but not with a super fast pandemic. Okay, well, Trump administration was burdened with the depletion that the Obama administration did because of the swine flu, or H1N1. I guess it was the bird flu, right? Whatever it was, the avian flu at the time. Remember all the panic and fear-mongering that they did in that time if you were alive. I remember quite well. It's just utter ridiculousness. I probably had it that year. I have never, by the way, tested positive for the flu anytime I've ever been really sick. So this got him talking about testing capacity is just utterly ridiculous. We know how the PCR tests work. We know that the World Health Organization just recently said, do not spend them up as much. And so now they're saying 30 to 35 times, something like that. But, guys, this thing exists, but it is not in any way, shape, or form necessitating the reaction in which we gave it. Maybe immediately when we didn't know anything. I'll concede that. But since last April, the end of April, beginning of May, definitely by the end of May, by the time we were in June, dude, this should have been done and over with. And those of you still out there complying with everything, man, I don't know. You can go along to get along, man, but you're not living to your full, honest self. Again, you're enslaved. You're enslaved by your own mental state. You're afraid what other people say to you. That should be a big deal to you. That other people are more in control of your life than your own self. It should be a huge deal. Another important and far-reaching consequence of velocity is that decision makers have more information and more analysis than ever before, but less time to decide. For politicians and business leaders, the need to gain a strategic perspective collides ever more frequently with the day-to-day pressures of immediate decisions, particularly obvious in the context of the pandemic and reinforced by the complexity as we see in the next section, which I will do at another time because I'm already almost at an hour. Guys, think about this. Ron DeSantis opened up Florida. It was supposedly a big deal. They're fine. There are some local mask mandates. Dude, I was just in Florida a week ago. Depending on where you're at, people do not care. Generally in my area, don't care. Not a big deal. People aren't going to say a lot if you decide not to wear a mask. I think I've been yelled at once as I walked into Walmart, which I just put my handkerchief up over my face just to get past the guy, not have a confrontation, and then pulled it back down. Am I saying that's right for you? I don't know. Do what you want. For me, it's a matter of avoiding conflict when I don't need to have conflict and to make people as comfortable as possible when I'm around them. I might pull it up, but generally speaking, I'm not really wearing the thing. I don't want to wear the thing, and it's utterly absurd to the point that now we're being told to wear numerous masks. Well, how come this occurred recently when a year ago this time, well, not quite a year ago, but in March, they were telling us, oh, no, don't wear masks. Like, where are your critical thinking skills at, folks? Why would you trust anything that Anthony Fauci has to say? Why would you trust any of these folks? Why would you trust the World Health Organization when they told us the wrong information and have flip-flopped so many times? Now, I listen to everything the World Health Organization has to say, because If I don't, YouTube will ban me. And they have. They've already yeeted a video of mine. Um, and it wasn't even me talking. It was somebody else. But in any case, just things to think about. Again, I will return with this on Monday. There's another book I want to get to that I'm thinking I might do next Thursday. So if you guys like the segment, please leave me a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. You know the thing. Hey, we're going to be, tonight is February 19th, and it's a Friday, and we had Don, the pleb, on the other day, and we're talking about it. We're going to have a little stream tonight on the ends justify the memes at 8 p.m. And we're going to have a little Friday night session, just chilling, and we'll be having some drinks. I'm going to not try and get too rowdy like the boys, because I know Tank will probably be putting it away, but I have things to do tomorrow, and so does he, because we have Radically Moderate on tomorrow, the ends justify the memes at 3 p.m. as well. And that is Eastern. In any case, guys, if you want to go check those out or go back, I will obviously have my links there in the description. With all that said, hey guys, this has been All Minus Story Time with Bill, and I wish you all well.